There's something to be said about in-person work. Now, I personally do a lot of remote work. I do a lot of remote consulting. So I am in favor of remote work as well as hybrid work. But there is something about that frontal experience of about being face to face. Quiet quitting hovers at about 50%, give or take. That's a really large number of people who are quietly disengaged in the workplace. So AI is here to stay, it's here to grow, and it is here to help us. It is not something to fear, but
Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. In this episode, I had a discussion with Cindy Urrutia. Cindy is the author of her new book, The Power of Recognizing Potential. She is a TEDx speaker on a soul alignment leadership. She has been helping leaders and visionary organizations shift from disconnection to presence, burnout to clarity, and surface level leadership to deep transformation. She spent over 10 years of university teaching and 6 years as executive director of a cultural arts center. She led teams, she built programs, she empowered diverse communities through creative emotional intelligence and intentional strategy. She's also a host of a podcast, and I will include a link to the podcast below this video. Now, this was very interesting discussion around the human potential at a workplace. Most business leaders not only they want to increase their productivity and to be more successful in business, they also want to help out the teams to be more efficient and to be more successful in their career. Cindy shared insights in this discussion on how to understand human potential, how to measure it, and also how to help your teams to not only work to their quotas or benchmarks, but also to the capacity and potential. I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I did. If you find a value in this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with your team. Until next time, please welcome Cindy Urrutia. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today our guest is Cindy Urrutia. Did I pronounce it right, the last name?
you pronounced it perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cindy, I just gone through your book, The Power of Recognizing Potential. You've been helping business leaders to deal with a lot of challenges. So I'm looking forward to a discussion. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored and excited to be here.
Okay, welcome. So let's start from where you see what's going on in nationally, internationally. Where you see some of the challenges. What kind of challenges business leaders are up against? I'm not. I know we've gone through tough economic time during the COVID time. So has anything changed? Like, or were you seeing some of the biggest challenges business leaders are dealing with?
I think what's happening right now is a conflation of challenges. And because of that, we don't always know which one to prioritize. So we do have some of the imprints and remnants of COVID, but then we also have new challenges. So let me first say a little bit about what we're still facing past COVID and some of what I see now. And I would also be curious to see what your thoughts on that are. Well, so one of the things that we saw with COVID was what we have all come to term as the Great Resignation. People resigned in massive numbers. We had never seen anything like that. The reason I believe that happened is because people were simply dissatisfied in the workplace. As we know, and Gallup has been reporting this over the several years, quiet quitting hovers at about 50%, give or take. That's a really large number of people who are quietly disengaged in the workplace. So, quiet quitting means that you don't quit your job, but you quit going above and beyond. You just do the bare minimum necessary so that you don't get fired.
Hmm.
And when we are looking at that number, about 50%, not just nationally in the US or Canada, but globally, that's a problem. So that's something that we had going into COVID and still persists today. And that quiet quitting is because people feel disengaged in the workplace. They're just not happy. They're not enjoying their places of employment because people's needs are shifting towards wellness. They want wellness and they want programs in the workplace that support them. That's not something we used to talk about 20, 30 years ago. It was starting to rise, but it really wasn't a foci. Now, we still see that happening post-COVID. People have returned to the workplace. The job market has tightened significantly. So there is this pressure now that, okay, maybe I do need to put in a little bit more effort, but I still want my needs met. Now, we're also looking at many things happening economically on the world stage. So without getting into politics, we have discussions around tariffs and how that affects, trade, how it affects, current accounting for many companies, not sorry, for many nations, and how those tariffs will not just affect GDP, but also your everyday mom and pop shop, as well as Fortune 500 companies. So there's a lot of uncertainty that's happening in terms of what is my bottom line? What is my bottom line? And how do I continue to make profits? And how do I take care of my employees?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a challenge, and it's like walking a tightrope. And yet, the data shows that when you care for your employees, you are you are likely to up to 5 times. Sorry, you are likely to exceed your financial goals by like 5 times.
Hmm.
So it's a bit of a challenge, and these are transitional times, in my opinion, where we're learning that employees want more, but how do I give them more and still make a profit?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point what you just mentioned. Yeah, definitely. It's so let's talk about employee. I think there's a lot to unpack. You mentioned few things out there. So let's talk about employees first side of things first. So taking care of employees has changed as well. We work in a decentralized environment. You could be hiring employees, globally. Different countries, different states, or different provinces in Canada, and we're not sitting in the same room anymore, right? So we all sit across the screen. Like you are, we are talking right now. So understanding somebody's needs and taking care of those needs a lot more challenges when you only see is the screen and you don't see. We used to sit in front of each other and just talk about all those challenges and solve the problems together. But now we have a very short window of, on somebody's, challenges. And also all we talking is on a screen. So who knows what's going on behind the scene? They could have a family challenges, financial challenges, or personal. There's so much going on in employees' life as well. It's hard to tap into all of those challenges and try to help. Where you see some of the initiatives taken in that area, and how do people tap into that?
You know, that is, I think, the magic question that we will be asking over the next 10 years. And I don't think that we have a succinct answer yet. But I will say that there's something to be said about in-person work. Now, I personally do a lot of remote work. I do a lot of remote consulting. So I am in favor of remote work as well as hybrid work. But there is something about that frontal experience, about being face to face, because if you think about this, you are in your office, something immediately comes up. You might have an employee come and knock on your door. Or if you have an administrative support person, they might go to that person because you might be in a meeting. And there might be a little bit more of an immediacy in terms of being able to communicate with you versus waiting for an email or waiting for a phone call that might have a bit more distance. So I know that this is a bit of a tricky conversation. There are many companies who are now asking employees to come back. There are many companies that are really promoting the hybrid model, which I think might end up being one of our best case scenarios because it'll give people an opportunity to work from home, but also come into the office and have that human interaction. Now, when we are working globally, we will have people only on a screen the way you and I are here. So, one of the things that we can do doesn't fully address the issue yet, but be mindful. Be mindful to nonverbal language. This is where having emotional intelligence and awareness of the people around you matter. And where listening matters. Just like you're attentively listening to me, paying
Yeah.
attention to my verbal cues, to what I'm saying, we can do that. And that's actually a sign of a very well evolved leader, one who's very mindful. You know, the old saying goes is that it's not the loudest person who runs the show. It's usually the quietest, most observant person. Those are some of the strongest leaders out there. So I think what we're going to be seeing is going to be a deeper dive into our human skills, how we
Really
relate to
interesting.
one another. In fact, people are so interested in this idea of the human. You know, the personal develop industry right now is at about $46 billion a year. And by 2032, it is expected to go to about 70 billion. That means that people are interested in something that has to do with the self, with relationships, with how we communicate, with how we develop. And it is not necessarily something that's different than the workplace because people develop themselves for many reasons. Some of them are for personal, to be a better human, and some of them are to be better at work, be a better, leader, be a better employee. But the fact remains that there is a significant interest in this idea of being human and developing ourselves. And the trend is only going up. And this is why we look at data, because data gives us an insight into what's happening. And that data, of course, we interpret it, but it's there nonetheless.
Yeah. Yeah, but without that personal development, whether it's a personal growth, or you developing some skill, without that growth in your personal life, I mean, business growth depends on it. Without that personal growth, there's no business growth, right? It's they're both related together, and I think that might be. So that brings to the next point. Your book about potential. How do you see potential? Like how do you understand the potential? If you can walk us our audience through when you were talking potential, what you were referring to?
So, potential is our untapped capabilities that can be developed, as well as our natural aptitudes. So, aptitudes and capabilities intersect, but they're not necessarily the same thing. You run a tech company, right?
Yep.
So, your natural aptitudes are in technology and leadership. My natural aptitudes are not necessarily technology, but I love technology and I like to learn about it. So I have the capability to develop technical skills, even though that's not where my main interest and aptitudes are.
Hmm.
But I just wanted to make that little differentiation. Now, let's go back to potential. People have unlimited potential, but we don't always see it. One of the things that I noticed is that the most obvious thing is what we overlook. So some people are very happy doing the bare minimum. They're very happy just showing up, clocking in 8 o'clock, taking a 1 hour break, and going home at 5. And they will do what is required of them. And that makes them happy. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are other people who want more. And those people who want more are your people who are often interested in personal development, in growth opportunities, but maybe haven't really cultivated their capabilities, their skills. And some of those people are going to have natural aptitudes towards certain things. and some of them will need to develop places where there's deficiencies. Everything at the end of the day is how we develop skills, things we are naturally good at, as well as things that we are not. Now, if you have that drive within you and you see intelligence in somebody, you see their potential, you want to develop them. But it's not fully your responsibility. It is also the responsibility of that person. Let's say you
Yeah.
see something in me. Well, it is also my responsibility to want to develop myself, to see that you've taken an interest in me and to meet you there. That's what I call the triad of recognition. It's not a binary thing and it's not a singular thing. It works both ways, and that requires self-awareness. And one of the things that we had mid-20th century social psychologists talk about is this idea of self-actualization, reaching towards your potential, reaching to fulfill your needs. That is where development comes in. But we do need to be mindful. In the book, and in my TEDx talk, I gave the example of a student called Adam, who I once had, who is extremely problematic. In the talk, I didn't have time to go too much into the story because of time constraints, but Adam was a gang member. He came from a background of a lot of violence, and he was very difficult to work with, but he was so incredibly bright. And we butted heads so many times, and this was my first year as a professor many, many moons ago. And I didn't give up on him, but I also didn't wanna give up on myself as a professor. It was my first year. So there was this this dance that Adam and I had where he would push and test boundaries, and I would push back and say, "No, these are the rules. We are being strict. I know you're smart. I know you could be better." We were always doing this dance until, the day that I mentioned in the book and in my TEDx talk where, his friend was shot and he cried in my arms, and he just cried because, he was so sad and devastated. And when I didn't lecture him, when I didn't tell him anything other than just to let him be and give him the support, he realized I don't have to fight the world. Just maybe someone really does see me. So just maybe I'm going to see myself too, and I'm going to put in an effort. And he did. Because sometimes all you have to do is see people and give it an opportunity, no matter how small it is. After that, it's up to them. You did your part.
Hmm.
The
Very
potential is
interesting.
everywhere. Yeah.
That is hard to tap into. I know a lot of business leaders and my colleague, we all struggle with that. Technical skills you can teach on a job. Any other skill set you need, you can. These are learnable skill we learn from jobs. We can teach people as well. But it's tapping into potential. That's the hardest part. When I hire, interview a lot of young folks on a daily basis. So I look for those things. Is there potential to grow? Can I grow them in a different roles, right? So tapping into that area is definitely, as you mentioned that with that potential, they're going to learn and they're going to grow, and you hope they grow with the company as you grow your company, right? So how do you what is some of that? Well, trying to understand that what could you look for that will give you some sort of sign for potential, during the interview process or when you meeting the first time somebody, right? Because you want to tap, because you only have a couple interviews you can go through it, and you need to make a decision on is there potential or not, right? What are some of the signs you can look for in people when you're hiring or when you're building a teams, that this person, maybe there's potential there that I can tap into?
What lights people up? When you're speaking to somebody, what lights them up? Where does their energy just light up?
Hmm.
Was it a project that you gave them an opportunity to take ownership of? Was it something that maybe their job has nothing to do with, but they're interested in? Now, why am I saying this? As you very wisely said. Skills can be taught. Technical skills, you can teach them, but you cannot teach people to love their job. You cannot teach
Mm.
people to be humane through to one another. You can only model it so that they model it as well. So what ends up happening is that we tap into our own human skills. What are those human skills? Emotional awareness, paying attention, listening to understand, not just to quickly respond or to have a solution. We as leaders are very solution focused. We want solutions to problems yesterday. And in our drive for solutions, we sometimes forget to just slow down and be fully present in the moment and pay
Mm.
full and complete attention and have awareness around us. And you won't always see things immediately. Sometimes it takes time, and you're not going to be able to gauge everything in an interview when you're hiring. That's why questions around how people react in certain situations are good questions. It's not about did you react in a good way or a bad way, but what was your reaction? How did you react to something that required resilience, to something that you were uncomfortable with? You're not looking for the perfect answer. Someone has to perfect an answer. I think it's a sign to worry when someone can be pretty honest about where they faced a challenge, what their resilience was, what they learned without making themselves too perfect. I think that that gives you a good insight into someone you can develop, because the people who have the most vulnerability and honesty are often the people with the most integrity, who you can trust. I prefer someone to tell me I made a mistake, I didn't know how to do it, how can we fix it? Versus, well, I'm an overachiever. My problem is that I work too hard. That's so generic.
Yeah, it reminds me just few weeks back, Cindy, we put out a job for technical skill set, um, and uh, and we set up that. Listen, we want to only talk to people who submit like 5 minutes video. Why they want a position, what they're working on. We wanted them to do a one-way interview, just recorded video, send it to us. So we had 5 questions, 5, 6 questions there. We were surprised. We didn't think that would be true, but all those, over 200 some people sent up to, the videos we received, all had the same answer. Exact the same word to word answer. So we thinking what happened. So it looks like they were reading from Chat GPT or from AI. And I had to put up, send a newsletter out to put a video. So listen, we're not looking for a perfect answer. Wrong answer is okay, but we're looking for your answer, not a Chat GPT answer. And I think that's one of the way that people overuse sometimes AI. Help that you don't need to. We're looking for a human side of you, but you're just reading from a Chat GPT or something. How could we understand your human side if you're going to read something from that's scripted?
Yeah. And I love that you said that, Gumrate. We're looking for your human side, because what happens is AI is here to stay. It's here to grow, and it is here to help us. It is not something to fear, but we have to use it wisely. I can certainly tell when people are using AI in this world, in these hard times. You're not broken. Like I should, a- and yet I see it over and over and over again. It's an echo room of the same platitudes and trope. I see it on LinkedIn all the time in professional posts. I see it, let's say, on YouTube when I'm scrolling just like everybody else to be entertained. So what ends up happening is we, one, either become too dependent on the technology and stop using our creativity, or two, it opens us up to delve deeper into our creativity. As an example, when the printing press came about 500 years ago, people thought it was the end of the world, right? Because books used to be done by hand with specific calligraphy. Some of the books would have paintings, and it was this laborious Herculean task that could take up to a year to do. especially if you were doing illuminated manuscripts. And all of a sudden, you have a printing press. That changed everything. Well, that just gave people an opportunity to be more creative with storytelling, right? And not just
Hmm.
copy books. We see something similar happen with the camera, with the film. Every time there's some sort of technological innovation, there's this push and pull. But the people's names who you remember, those who make their mark in history, take the technology and infuse it with their humanity and their creativity.
Hmm. Yeah, it's supposed to be make you more productive, not that unhuman, right? So you want to still stay that day. If you're in a service business and you provide a customer service or service to another human, you can't provide that with the technology. You're gonna need a human to provide service to another humans, which is sales, roles or any customer service roles. These roles going to be more and more demand on a human side. If you simply just whether you use technology or not, but you end of the day you providing service to humans other side. You gotta be more of that to provide the service.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna piggyback off of what you just said. Customer service requires service. So there's times where things are very techy and you can troubleshoot them and solve them. And a chat box can help you do that. But there's times when it can't, and a human is being human, very frustrated. And you get that customer service agent on the line, and they just say, I'm sorry you had a hard time. Let me see how I can help you. Automatically, it diffuses a situation because sometimes as humans, we want to belong, we want to be understood, and we want to be helped. That's something you find in everybody at every level of society, including businesses, both vertically and horizontally. And when you have that connection, it makes such a big difference. And that's when you get your customers coming back because not only did you give them the service, you made them feel human. Why do your customers come back to you when they
Yeah,
go to your competitors? One, obviously, you provide a great service, but it's also you. It's also your company. It is
yeah,
the experience that they get from you. That's why people come back. People stay loyal, not because things are sometimes, the only option, but because of how the product, the people make them feel in addition to solving their problems. And
yeah.
that
Emotional connection.
exactly.
Yeah. So what inspired you to write a book on a potential, Cindy? You had your own career before you write a book. So what transpired you in your journey that you decided you're going to write a book on a potential?
Well, life sometimes takes us there. It's not always a plan. So I was very happy and content for many years in my career in higher education. I taught for 10, then I was a center director. I revitalized the center, which had been dormant for 3 years. After I took over, I revamped its entire organizational structure, made sure that we were solvent financially, brought in grants, did all of the things that you do so that you run a successful center within a university setting, which is, a little bit different than in the private sector, but there's still certain tenants that overlap and need to be met. And when once the center was fully functional, we were receiving national recognition, like receiving a letter. Our faculty, for example, received a letter from former US Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy to congratulate us and to recognize some of the work that we had done through programming, had been on the Smithsonian Online Magazine. So we had the recognition, we had everything. And I loved my job, and I said, what? I love being a director, but I think I might wanna be a dean or, um, a provost or a university president. I have, the PhD. I have, the teaching background because normally you do have to have for four-year universities, it's different for community college. Uh, you have to have you have to have had a certain amount of experience in certain roles to go up the ladder per se. The way my job was classified, I could only stay at director. And by the way, director is a great role. There's nothing wrong with that. Most people would want that job that I had. But
Yeah.
I'm a person who's always seeking expansion. I said, you know what? I want to be a provost one day. I want to be a president one day. So I spoke to my former boss, who by the way I have a lot of respect for, and I said, this is what you had before I came in, which is a fully dormant center, zero programming. We didn't have solvency, and this is what we have now. I would like for my job to be reclassified or for a raise given
Hmm.
my performance metrics. Because if you're going to ask for reclassification or a raise, you need to have the metrics to back it up. You just don't go in and say, hey, I want a raise just because I want it.
Yeah.
So I went in there prepared. And, my boss said, it's not in the budget. We can't do it. Same thing next year. And yet my reviews were always stellar. My reviews were always 100%. Did it, did it. And so I continued in the job because I loved it. But I kept on thinking, I have the capacity to do more. I can be more.
Hmm.
And so COVID came about, and my mother was diagnosed with COVID. She was intubated for several months before she transitioned, and it was a very difficult time where I'm putting things on a scale. I'm like, okay, well, I have a great job, I have a good salary, everything's fine. I'm highly respected within the university. I'm highly respected in the city. People know who I am. I travel internationally all the time. Doors are open for me. But I'm not feeling full fulfillment because I know I could be more, right? That's the human need to express themselves. Like I said, some people are okay, 9 to 5, and some people want more. I happen to be one of those people who are always wanting to grow. So I said, I can have this job in any city and I can get hired in a different and I can be hired within the classification that I would like so that I could, go up the ladder per se. So I resigned, but it was mostly driven from being far away from my mother who was in a hospital in a different city. Of course, back then we couldn't even visit people in the hospital, but it was this idea of I'm not fully growing, but I'm away from family.
Hmm.
So I resigned. And what I ended up seeing is a lot of people were doing the same thing. In fact, my dean said to me, Cindy, you're not the only person that gave a notice. She goes, I have fully tenured professors resigning to move back home, to be closer to family, to find more emotional fulfillment. And what ended up happening is that I had to give myself time to grieve the passing of my mother and figure things out. And that's when I said to myself, "Oh, I don't think I was given a platform to fully actualize my full potential." Even though wonderful bosses, I can't speak high, they're good humans, right? And as you said earlier, sometimes we miss people, we miss things in people for different reasons. And so started to do research. I said, well, you know what? I wonder what the data says because I'm a big believer in data. Data doesn't lie,
Hmm. Yep.
as you know this.
Yeah.
And that's when I found the numbers on quiet quitting, the numbers on disaffection, the numbers on people saying, 74% of people say that they're not being developed professionally. So then I realized, oh, this is not something unique to my experience. There was nothing personal in my experience. This is something that's happening across the board.
Hmm.
People have a lot of potential, but it's not always being developed. Um, and the funny thing was that after I left my job, I kept on being asked to come back, um, and it got reclassified the way I wanted it and all of that. But by that time, I felt like I had achieved what I was meant to achieve there. And I was very grateful because I can tell you, just because somebody quits their job like I did, it doesn't mean that the job was a bad experience. It's a very good place. But again, it's this idea that if your people want to grow, the metrics show it. The metrics show that they're productive, that they're bringing in the revenue. Develop them
Yeah,
because
you gotta provide platform for them to grow, right? So if you're not providing platform to grow, that's on you. If you provide platform to grow and they don't grow, then it's on them, right? So,
that
but you gotta provide the platform. I think that's the key point. I think you mentioned that, the platform has to be there, has to have a lot of possibilities, a lot of opportunities, a lot of that. And I think a lot of business leaders I talk to, I think they spend a lot of time in that area, building the platform that, yeah, I built ABC company, but my people need more opportunities. How about if I, bring another product and another service in, it creates more opportunities for my employees, right? So you got to build that and you got to nurture that platform so everybody can grow out of that.
exactly. I love that you bring that up because also one of the things I tell people is sometimes you still need to develop yourself further. So always be upskilling and have a growth and development plan. A growth and development plan does not assure you a promotion or a raise, but it puts you on the path. That growth and development plan should be done with HR or your supervisor, meaning what skills do I need to develop?
Hmm.
Which ones are already strong? What is the pathway? How can I contribute to this wonderful company so that this company also provides for me so that it's a mutual thing because it's not just about the employee and it's not just about the company, it's about both because they reinforce one another.
Hmm. There's a Natalie Dawson. He shoot her book on a work, and I learned from her that she calls it PPP, personal, professional, and what was the last one? Personal, professional, and there was another P, personal, financial, PFP, as personal, financial, and professional. So those three goals you want to give it to your staff anytime, and you want to measure those goals, and that kind of forces them to look into the potential because only they know the potential. You don't know, you don't know their potential. Only they have idea what the potential is. So, but if you put them on a goal for personal, professional, and professional development, they will discover those potential and go towards that area. So.
Yeah. And if I may add to that, this is why benchmarks are important. So if you say, okay, this is your how we're going to develop you, but this is what you need to do. So in 6 months' time, your skill that is at a 3 needs to be at a 5. Or if it's at a 6, it needs to be at a 7. You do need to give people very clear benchmarks because if you don't, they'll come back to you and say, "But you didn't tell me I needed to be yeah, I needed to improve by 20%." Uh, so, as I do believe it's a personal responsibility, but for individuals to say, "This is what I'm going to do to develop myself," but as leaders, we have to provide the rubrics.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, that's where miscommunication happens. People say, "Well, you promised me X." You think I promised you X, but I didn't because I never said X.
Yeah.
So we have to provide very clear benchmarks. And based on that, you look at where your numbers are at as an organization. Can you afford, to grow in a certain direction? Can you afford the race? Can you afford this? Based on where your organizational numbers are at, as well as what the employee has done for you. So there has to be intersectionality.
Hmm.
If not, it's going to hurt the employee and hurt the organization, which is what we don't want.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. So, were you spending a lot of your time and energy these days, Cindy? I know you. The book is doing very well. Great book, by the way. I just finished reading it. A lot of insights. Um, but were you spending a lot of time and energy? Are you still on a teaching side or more on a book side? Were you spending time?
So, I consult with people, with organizations, but I'm actually working on another book right now that I'm very excited about, which I think there's a need for, and that's more about this idea of the self and this idea of actualization. I don't wanna go into too many details yet because the book, it's still being written and I wanna keep it contained. But at the end of the day, Gurmeet, we all want to belong and we all want to feel fulfilled. That's what we want. Expressing ourselves through a potential is a great way to do it. And I also want to add this. We are seeing generational shifts in the workplace, right? The way the boomers, the Xers, the millennials, and the Gen Zers act are completely different. We have
Yeah,
high turnover rates with the Gen Zers that are unimaginable for the Xers, the boomers.
yeah.
So, what that's pointing to is this idea of meeting the needs of your employees, but the employees also have a role to play.
Yeah. And one of the item I noticed, I'm not sure that aligned with what you just mentioned or maybe different take on it, that I hire a lot of younger people. 5, 10 years from my university colleges, I hire a lot of young people because technology happens to be their strength, right? Um,
Mhm.
one of the item I noticed, the young people when I interviewed them or was sitting down with them, one thing they're looking for sure is that they're looking for somebody they can model after. Old days we used to tell them, give them instructions. Hey, this is what we want you to do. They're looking for up to you. That are you doing the same thing you're telling them to do? So that they're looking for you to lead by example instead of just giving them instructions on what to do. And I think that all the young people they looking for that. That listen, if you're doing something different, you're telling me to do something different, it doesn't match well.
Yes, and I think you're pointing to something essential for leaders to be aware of. And I think they are, but it's easy to forget. Gen Zers are looking for well-being, work-life balance, and growth opportunities. And those growth opportunities come about through mentoring. The biggest way you can help people is through mentorship. Mentorship is an art. Mentorship can be something official or unofficial. It can be, how are you doing today? Oh, did you think about maybe doing XYZ in a different manner? You can mentor people without it being a very traditional. What you're always doing is asking them questions about, did you think about doing it this way? Have you thought about this? Because then that brings them to the forefront, their agency, their thoughts, their opinions. But they're looking at you who's already walked the path and saying, oh, this person's asking me this. I wonder why. There's something here for me. If you mentor people, if they model you, if you provide the values, they will stay. That's what Gen Z is asking for. And it's very different than it was for, my generation. I'm an Xer. So, when I graduated, I went to work, I did what I was told, and there wasn't such a thing as these are, the values that, match. There wasn't this thing of matching personal values with company values. It didn't exist back then. It does now. And so as much as we are staying with the times in terms of technology, we also have to stay with the times in terms of cultural shifts. And those cultural shifts, they are not bound just to the West. They're happening globally. And the companies that respond to these shifts will be the companies that dominate. their industries.
Very interesting. So hopefully the business leaders are watching us, listening to us, they definitely take some clues out of that and start working on these, what you just mentioned. And get a copy of your book. There's a lot of insight in your book as well. So where can people find you, Cindy? Where can they find your book? How can they connect with you?
Well, I have a website. It's my name, cindyurrutia.com, CINDYURRUTIA.com. My book is on Amazon called The Power of Recognizing Potential,
Yeah.
and it's available through Audible for the people who like to listen to books. It's on Kindle and it's on paperback. It's a short book, and, if for those of you who do end up purchasing it, feel free to send me an email with your thoughts. I love hearing back from people. It is just such a joy when people, check in and say, you know what, that sounded familiar to my experience where I found XYZ useful.
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, Gumrit, we are here to elevate one another.
yeah.
And we can do that through books, through conversations, through people, through business, through products.
Yeah. When is the new book coming out, Cindy?
Well, the new book, which I have it planned for the fall, and it's really more of an edges in terms of the spirit. Because one thing, and I'll keep it brief because I don't want to deviate too much, is the higher up that sometimes you get in your personal development, in leadership, in a position, the more interested people become in consciousness and their spirit. So what we're
True.
on, yeah, because okay, so Gumrit, you run a very successful business, but you also have a podcast. And this podcast is providing a service, right? That's a way for you to express yourself beyond your job. So think about this. I've noticed a lot of people, they exit a company, okay, I made 100 million, I'm doing an exit, I'm doing this. And what do they end up doing afterwards? Things that contribute to society, whether it be a podcast, through NGOs, or what have you not. Because the more you grow yourself, the more interested you become in this idea of who am I as a human, my potential, and what is my contribution to the world. And I can only contribute to the world when I understand myself first. So that's some of the concepts that'll be in the book. Keep an eye on the website. I'm still working out the title, but it should be available this fall.
Very interesting. Looking forward to it. I'm going to definitely include a link below this video for your current book and also for your website and your LinkedIn page. People can, click a button and they can connect with you. And, Evan, I appreciate your time, all the time you spend, all the insight you've given me, and, definitely your book as well. So business leader who are watching, who are listening to us, I will definitely, strongly encourage that listener, get a copy of your book, click a button, link, connect with you, have a conversation. I learned a lot from our conversation. I'm sure whoever have a discussion with you, they're gonna learn a lot as well. So strongly encourage people to click a button and have a conversation with you. Who knows where the conversation can take you.
Thank you. And Gurmeet, I want to really thank you for your time, for your generosity of spirit, and for hosting me. Thank you. And thank you for being a leader who takes care of his people, has a successful company, and has this podcast, because all of us benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you.